Campbell Newman has had a pretty good run since taking over the leadership of the LNP earlier this year. Opinion polls tell us voters like what they see, and Brisbane's former Lord Mayor is more than likely to be the next Premier. But this week, the smooth ride hit a very rough patch. After accusing Labor of digging dirt on him, Mr Newman was embarrassed and angry to find out via the Courier Mail that a dirt file on Labor MPs was sitting in a safe at LNP headquarters. The party had paid a former ALP staffer $3,000 to sling sleaze. What was meant to be an election weapon against the government blew up in the LNP's hands. To discuss this week's events, I spoke earlier to political reporter Chris O'Brien at Parliament House. Chris, mudslinging dominated question time every day this week, even before the dirt file came out.
Jess, the timing of this own goal by the LNP is just so unfortunate for Campbell Newman and the LNP. If he hadn't been so strident recently, and that's his own word, about the ALP's attacks on him, this LNP dirt file wouldn't have been such an issue. And of course, ironically, as you say, it was the opposition which began the week talking about dirt.
That this Parliament notes that the Bligh Labor government has become totally focused on mudslinging and personally attacking Campbell Newman, rather than addressing the many important issues facing the people of Queensland.
Order. Those on my right.
And calls upon Premier Bligh and her ministers to either focus on the business of governing Queensland or call a state election immediately. So totally focused is the Treasurer on Campbell Newman, he's like the proverbial rabbit in the spotlight. Totally dazzled by Campbell Newman. It's Campbell Newman everything. Campbell Newman this, Campbell Newman that.
Prophetic words, but not as Mr Sini intended. Less than 24 hours later, Chris, the muddy shoe was on the other foot.
Mr Newman had the rug pulled out from under him by his own party when the Courier Mail exposed the existence at LNP headquarters of a SWOT file. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. That's polite language for what turned out to be, in part, a tawdry list of Labor MPs' sexual preferences, family problems, drinking issues, temper tantrums. It was meant to be election ammunition against the ALP, but the very fact of the existence of this dirt file was very awkward for the LNP, for Campbell Newman and the parliamentary wing, as the government went straight to the moral high ground.
What makes this grubby act even lower is the hypocrisy of those opposite. They won't stand up to their party organisation. They are so scared to stand up to those grubs in their party organisation and this unelected leader, Mr Speaker.
I'd ask the Honourable Minister to use parliamentary language, I think.
Well, Mr Speaker, it's pretty outrageous when you see the
conduct yourself with language that's moderate.
Speaker. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Jess, that was chapter 1 of the tripe, to borrow Craig Wallace's word, the material that came from a former ALP insider to the LNP's State Director and Campaign Director. Chapter 2, the next day, had even more detail of what the LNP had collected.
These files contained the names of the schools that our children go to.
Thank you, Mr.
How low are these
Thank
people?
You, Mr.
That of the Attorney-General. What does it say on his file? Adopted, epileptic. What campaign purpose was this going to be put to?
Chris, because this erupted in a sitting week, the opposition had to come up with some parliamentary tactics to deal with it.
That's right, although Campbell Newman began outside the House with a stern denunciation of the two LNP staffers involved.
I have been very critical of the Labor state government and Anna Bligh for undertaking these sorts of activities using taxpayer funds, and indeed they continue to do that. But I am disappointed and indeed quite angry when I see that my own party, using their funds, has done the same thing. This sort of sleazy politics is unacceptable to me, the parliamentary team and our candidates.
But inside Parliament, the LNP knew it had to try to get onto the front foot. Because it knew the government was going to be calling for the sacking of the two LNP staffers involved, the opposition got in first, suggesting that any number of ministers should have been sacked for various portfolio bungles.
Why did not the Premier apply leadership, take action and sack Minister Lucas?
In the end, no one's been sacked.
No, severe reprimands have been the extent of it. Not to mention, though, a little arm wrestle between the LNP headquarters and the parliamentary wing. Mr Sini and Mr Newman wanted total assurances that the LNP president and the treasurer weren't involved.
Things got a bit testy there, Chris.
I think they did. It's an interesting test, too, of how this still very unusual leadership arrangement handles situations like this.
I guess the other point is that many voters will say both sides are at fault in the sleaze war.
And that's why I think the next opinion poll will be fascinating to see if any of this has had an impact at all. Just one other loose end too, Jess, to tie up, and it relates to the pecuniary interests controversy. A government move to have the financial details of spouses released may have been a little hasty. A parliamentary committee has made it clear it's in no hurry to do any such thing.
The CLA stresses that there is no evidence or suggestion that the current arrangements have failed and that the public interest is not being served. In circumstances where no impediment to accountability has been revealed, the CLA has determined that it is important that before recommending any changes to the Legislative Assembly, the persons to be affected are provided procedural fairness and the courtesy of direct consultation.
Well, I think that's parliamentary language for hold your horses. Chris, I don't think those disclosure rules will change by the time Parliament resumes in a fortnight.
I don't either, Jess, but we'll be here watching if they do.
Chris O'Brien, thank you.